Audio is a huge part of video, generally. And I say generally because it is known throughout the industry that an audience will forgive a slightly less quality video if the audio is good. Hence why, and this is quite tongue-in-cheek, but hence why I'm using quite an expensive microphone to record this rather than just a cheap small microphone, because you have to deal with the audio all the time. You can look away from video. Of course, you can mute the audio, but it's no use to you once it's muted. You can look away from the video at times. You can kind of see what you want to see throughout the whole picture, whereas audio is all being fed to you at the same time. So good quality audio makes up at least 50% of a good video, if not more. I say most of the time because that's changed a little in recent years, depending on where you're consuming the media that is video. Because a lot of people watch video on mute, say if they're on a bus or a train or in public, or they're on the sofa and someone else is watching the TV and they're watching a video on their mobile device, whether they're scrolling through TikTok or Facebook or Instagram stories. And that is where subtitles come in a lot, especially if, well, there's spoken dialogue. But it still does speak to the point that audio is really important. So you should never forget the importance of good audio. That's what we're going to touch on now in this section. And first off, we're going to understand the audio tracks. So if we just revert just quickly back to the video tracks, you've got 1 through 5 video tracks going left to right. Now below this definite line is the audio tracks, or are the audio tracks. If I hold down Shift, by the way, and scroll down, it shrinks up all the audio tracks so I can see them all. Same with the top. I come into the top and hold down Shift and scroll down, and it will either grow or shrink, while scrolling down will shrink them down. I hope that's a little tidbit that you'll use. You will, I promise. Yeah, you can do it manually by up and down with these sliders here, but I find, and of course here as well, but I always use the scroll wheel. If you've only got a touchpad on a laptop, as I said earlier in this course, I would highly suggest you adding a mouse. But if you haven't got a mouse and you still want to use this function with the scroll, most modern day laptops, the touchpad will support two finger scrolling. You'll already know that. So just like the video tracks are here, the audio tracks are here. But the audio tracks in the workspace that we have set up are also duplicated. And that is up here with Audio Track Mixer. Remember when I said to get rid of the audio clip mixer. And that's because, and I'm only going to mention this now, and then we're never going to talk about audio clip mixer again, because I think it's one of the most dangerous things to have in a workspace. Because what this audio clip mixer does is it only affects one clip, and you could be dialing in settings, etc. And because they look so similar to the audio track mixer, you could be affecting just one track, and the rest of the clips on that track won't be affected. And personally, the way that I've learned and the way that I'm teaching you, you will never need the audio clip mixer. We just don't need it. So I'm going to close that panel out. We just do not use that. So I know we've got no audio, as you can see down here, but let's just have a quick look at the audio track mixer, because there are a number of things in here which you need to be aware of all the way through your production, all the way through your editing. First and foremost, we have a drop down here for the audio to go to the mix. And what does that mean? Well, that means that all of these clips, all of these tracks are going to the main mix. We can add another submix. See how this is titled mix? what I always title this as, and what it used to be, I don't know why it's changed, but this used to be titled as master. And it won't let me edit that. That's strange. That must be an update. However, we can change the titles here. Let me change this to VO. That's what you'd use for voiceover. And maybe we'll change this to BGM, so background music. And you could do that all the way down. And it helps you to just keep a track of what is playing on which track. And when you've got a numerous tracks all the way through this sequence, it's really handy to see what is peaking or it's too quiet that needs to be turned up and all that. It's always really, really handy to label these. But we've got 4 tracks and we've got the mix or the master. If we right click down here, we can add an audio submix. Why would we do that? Well, say you've got voice here and you've got maybe background music here as we have, and you've got maybe sound effects here. Well, let's say that the sound effects, SFX, you wanted to have the sound effects and the background music going to a separate mix before it got to the main. And you want the main voiceover going straight to the main. This is all to do with your audio, sound, and how you want that final mix to be. Well, that's where this drop down comes in, because now rather than just mix, we now have the option to send it to a sub mix. So let's send the background music and the sound effects, see here, to the sub mix. Now within this sub mix, you can turn it up and down should you wish to, because these are sliders or faders, just like on a music desk. You know, when you see in these big recording studios, that's what these are. These are faders. They all default to set to 0 dB and can be taken all the way down to infinity, minus infinity, and all the way up to plus 15 dB. If you ever want to get it back to 0, and this works in so many different areas within the Adobe suite, not just Premiere Pro, double click and it'll snap straight back up to 0. You may not, and to be honest with you, I know a number of editors that never work with a submix. I'm just explaining that so you don't go through and think, oh, well, why am I being given a mix? And when the submix wasn't there, my options are mix or mix. That's why. If you ever need a submix, and you'll know when you come across it and you come across a time in your editing where you may need it, that's where it is. And you can have several submixes. So you can have, maybe you've got 2 or 3 people talking at the same time. You could have them all set up and EQ'd how you want them, and then send them to the vocal submix. And then you'd have a music and sound effects submix. This can build on and build on and build on. So on top of the option to switch where it goes to, whether it goes to the main mix or master and the submix, you have the option to pan. So this goes all the way over to the left speaker. This goes all the way over to the right speaker. You see how we're dragging like we have done in the past in the effects controls? That's where that does. Also, you can click in here and dial in a number, and also you can double click to get back to 0. Next down, we have read. You've got off, latch, touch, and write. This is all part of automation. And in all honesty, as a professional videographer, I never use this. I have in the past, but I think it over complicates things. In short, if we have it on write, you could go all the way through a production, and let's say rather than write on there, let's put it on write on BGM. That's the background music. You could then play it back and maybe set your music down to here. Okay, then we're playing, and what we then do is maybe turn down your music to here, and then it's a point where you want the music up a bit, and then maybe up a little bit, and then maybe all the way up. If we then stop and play that back, you see how this is all moving? say we set it to write and go back to the beginning and start it playing, and you bring your music, say, down to a little bit like here, and then maybe it needs to be a little bit quieter, and then it needs to be all the way up here, and then maybe down a little bit. Because we've then gone to write that, if we then go back to read, look how it all changes. And it's supposed to change all the way through, but it never really does. And I don't think that's ever been worked on, purely because it doesn't really work and no one uses it. Let me just check I've got all that out. Yeah, all that information is out of this slider. And that's also because there's a great way to do it automatically, which we will touch on in a future section, to easily level your music. So that's all of the audio track mixer, but it's not, because those eagle-eyed among you, and I know I'm always calling out on the eagle-eyed, you have a drop down. So now what we have is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots for effects. We also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots for second assignments. Now the second assignments are all to do again with submixers and mono submixers and adaptive submixers. I've never used these, and I don't know anyone in the industry who does. Maybe audio designers would use these, but this is the minutiae. Whereas these, I've used these a lot. And this is where using the audio track rather than the audio clip is most important. Let's say you have a talking head and all the audio on clip 1 is talking, and you want to boost all of that talking. Well, then maybe go to slot 1 and you have all of these. You may not have the VSTs. Well, you definitely won't have the VSTs because these are plugins that I use. But here we have so many options to affect your audio and to give it just a nice little punch. I often come into amplitude and compression, down to multiband compressor, click it, and nothing happens other than multiband compressor comes up here. But it's now in the chain. And what we do is we double click, and all of a sudden we're greeted with this. Now I know this could be quite daunting for some, which is why I've got no music in there, no audio in here right now, because I want to just show you this space. And although the multiband compressor is a greatly customizable tool, and you can change all the different bands of the audio all the way, reading all the hertz, what I often do is just simply drop down a preset and hit broadcast. Broadcast is a really easy way to just give punch to everything. I mean, to everything. I will show you a little bit later how that works, but I want you to see just how important this track mixer is, because it makes all the difference with your audio. So that's the audio track mixer. And what we're going to do next is going to find some audio, first off some music, and then maybe some sound effects to bring in to the project.